Did you hear?
Hear what?
Tucker's in Moscow.
Ah, Jesus. What's he doing there?
Yeah, he's a traitor.
Yeah.
That's what the media said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Yuki's heads are exploding. This can't happen. He's
How dare he?
He was photoed. Maybe he himself didn't mind the photos being shared, but it looked like it was done on the QT. He was photoed in the Bolshoi Ballet. So, has he finally got an interview with Putin lined up?
Done on the QT, although he mentioned before now, like he tried to go, or he tried to set it up a couple of years ago, and it got the kibosh put on it because
national security.
Well, he said it himself.
He got a message from a friend who wouldn't talk to him over devices. He wanted to meet in person to tell him that people he knew were watching him or reading his messages.
Yeah.
This is no, you can't do that.
And that made him
made him talk about it publicly.
Yeah, and think twice about it, obviously, or maybe. But then, obviously, he can't just decide to go and meet Putin whenever he wants, right? I mean, it has to be
arranged.
Yeah. So, but apparently, it's happened the same. So certainly, given that they've been keeping tabs on him, it's not on the QT. It wasn't on the QT from the point of view of the CIA, you know. They were probably well aware of what he's up to, you know. They say CIA, CIA or NSA, whatever. They were reading his messages and sending his messages to people in Washington. He didn't mention who it was in Washington DC, but it's obviously some politician who wanted to give him a heads up, basically, that called him up and said, "You going to interview Putin?" And he was like, "How the hell do you know that?" He's like, "Well, because I got your messages sent to me from nice people in Washington DC." So,
and if it's anywhere, it'll be shown on Twitter, of course.
Yeah, on his show,
Which, more heat from Musk. Anyway, this week we're probably gonna mainly cover the strikes and counter-strikes again in the Middle East. This is like the same as 2 weeks ago where missiles were firing everywhere. It's not even clear who's doing what, but we have some idea, I think. The main takeaway, if you were following Western media, is that the US is proud that it has struck, quote, IRGC targets in Iraq and Syria.
Yep.
And that's meant to convey to people. They may as well said, yeah, we hit Iran, but obviously that's not the case. The first thing is, of course, that
actually,
it was breaking news, but we were on the show last Sunday.
Yeah,
you said it was being reported that three American soldiers were killed.
Just before we get off, this is the video. Just before we get off Tucker, here's the bit about where he said a couple of years ago.
I got a call from somebody in Washington. This person said, you're going to come to Washington anytime soon. Yeah, actually, I'm going to be up in a week. Meet me Sunday morning. So I go, and this person's like, are you planning a trip to go see Putin? And I was like, how would you know that? I haven't told anybody. I mean, anybody. Not my brother, not my wife, nobody. How would you know that?
Right. That must have left out the part where...
That's not them meeting.
That's not them meeting, but that's the part where he says, well, because I got sent your text messages were snooped on by the NSA or CIA or whoever the alphabet agencies, and they forwarded them to me. They were spread them around Washington DC, saying, "Did you know Tucker's going to go and interview Putin? Isn't that terrible? Aren't you all? Isn't he anti-American?" And yeah, like I said, don't know if that was planned at the time or whatever, but maybe it wasn't. In the sense that maybe because I think at the time, Peskov the Russian White House spokesman. What's the Russian White House called? The Kremlin. That's right. He said that that he would, when he was asked, I think he was asked about at that time a couple of years ago when that came out that Tucker might have been going there. Peskov was asked, and he said, Putin has no problem talking to American journalists, but at the minute he's going to wait until the kind of hysteria and rabid anti-Russian sentiment amongst the Western media has died down a bit, because there's just no point. You can imagine, like, why would Putin talk to any Western standard mainstream media journalist when all they're going to do is throw bullshit questions his way, like questions that amount to, have you stopped beating your wife yet? So, yeah, but so maybe the time, but it's not that that's changed, that's just got worse since then.
When would it ever die down?
It would never die down. But yeah, if anybody's going to get an audience with Putin, it's going to be Carlson, anybody from the West, because he's basically open-minded. So anyway, yeah, back to,
Armageddon.
This has been going on for, what is it, October 7th? 4 months now?
October, November, December, January. Yeah, okay.
So this kind of like war with Iran has been going on for 4 months. We've been at war. We collectively in the West have been at war with Iran for 4 months, and you didn't know it, Neil. You didn't know because you were expecting it to all go pear-shaped before now. I mean, you would have thought that if the West was at war with Iran, 4 months in, it would be well past Armageddon. Armageddon would be done and dusted, and would be dealing with the.
We'd be in the new world now.
Yeah,
everything would be fine again.
But you see, America doesn't want escalation in the Middle East.
Yeah,
it wants to keep things the way they are.
Yeah, I have a statement from Lloyd Austin, who's back, actually exactly saying that. Okay, so when the news broke last week, the thing that struck us first, you mentioned it maybe on the show or to me in the meantime, is that this is strange. This is unusual from other reports from the Pentagon, in that up front, they're saying 3 US troops have been killed, and releasing their names and photos. That never happens, not in the last X number of years. And then all week long, they were kind of dropping hints. You remember, like Wednesday and maybe Thursday, it was like they were putting out feelers in the press that Biden's gone into the secure room, and any minute now, and you could almost feel the excitement from Washington all the way across the Atlantic that they were about to bomb Iran any day. Yeah. I forgot where I saw this, but I think there is a statement and it's revealed by an Iranian official response that the U.S. government, the reason why it was weapons hot maybe all week long was because they were attempting to bargain directly with Tehran about letting the U.S. conduct limited strikes against their country. So it was kind of like, look, we're just going to hit just a few places. I mean, an empty building, whatever, just let us hit something. And then the deal is you won't fire back, and we'll get to report to the American people that, quote, we hit Iran, that we got them back for what they did to our boys and girls. And it's revealed by the Iranian response. Is your memory of that? I don't have a link that shows that this kind of bargaining was going on, but anyway, it reminds me of 4 years ago. It's like deja vu, when Soleimani was assassinated. There was a week of tension, and then the Iranians, quote, got revenge, and the Americans said, okay, done. And it was, I think, was it revealed that there had been intermediaries in Switzerland arranging for how that would happen. So the base that was hit, the Al-Assad air base that the US is positioned in northern Iraq, wasn't surprised by what was about to happen. So it was kind of a bargained, arranged tit for tat. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not a war, but that's both sides know that it'll be limited to this. So the same thing was happening this week. Okay, so limited strikes against Iran. That's what, the war hawks like Lindsey Graham were. Hit Iran hard now. But by week's end, they changed that to, were bombing Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. Maybe they think Americans don't understand the geography of it, that that's two different countries. That's not Iran directly. The whole thing is smoke and mirrors. Like, if you go back to last Sunday, the Jordanian government very clearly stated that the attack that took place with a drone, 3 dead Americans, 28 some injured, did not happen in their country at this Tower 22 place, but at the US base across the border in Syria, Al-Tanf or At-Tanf, I'm not sure which of the spellings is correct. So look at this, only the Russians, as far as I'm aware, bothered reporting that. I saw it in AP. AP put it in their write-up of the attack. They put it, the last sentence. It just simply said, Jordan denies that any attack took place in their country. But the whole article assumes that that's what happened. So here's a more complete response from Jordan. Jordan says attacked US base is located in Syria. Carried in task the Russian news agency. Jordan has refuted Biden's statement that US forces were attacked in Jordan's territory. And the statement comes from the Jordanian Minister of Communications, Mubaidin, who says the US base that came under an attack is located outside Jordan. And specifically, it's instead Al-Tanf area, maybe not the base directly. Who knows? No one's quite sure what's going on in Al-Tanf. It's been a black hole ever since ISIS appeared in pretty much the same area. It's referred to as the 55-kilometer zone. It's more than just a US base. There's other stuff going on there too. It's very murky. And that's it. That's the rebuttal. Now, since then, Jordan's played ball and has, I don't know if they've issued a formal updated statement, but they're certainly playing ball by playing along with this. So I think that's possibly it's the first thing that tells you, okay, this is contrived. There's something else going on. Something real happened for sure, but why mask the fact that it was in Syria rather than Jordan? And it's probably something to do with what goes on in that base, like I said.
There's a map there. It's
Yeah.
so there's Tower 22, which is inside Jordan, and then the Tanf base is just over the border. So I mean, the reason for saying that Tower 22 was hit was because that's in Jordan, and therefore the US has a right to right to respond. Let's say in assistance to its ally Jordan.
Exactly.
But if it's Al-Tanf base, then that Al-Tanf base brings attention to Al-Tanf base, and the fact that it's
therefore legitimate for it to be attacked.
You know, it's illegally held. It's an American base in Syria, illegal under international law. The US was never invited in there, and it's one of many places, a significant part of Syria that the US is occupying illegally. So for anyone in the area from Syria or even from Iraq to attack that base would be legitimate. So they'd rather not talk about that in that context. They claim it was Tower 22. I mean, it was just flagrant lying basically to the public, you know. Let's just go with Tower 22, say Tower 22 is hit because that's, you know, a peaceful American military base in Jordan, and it's, you know, they're at the invitation of the Jordanian government, and the evil Iraqi militias, whoever, attacked it, therefore we're going to respond. But obviously that isn't the case, and that's why Jordan said, actually, this wasn't Tower 22, it was, and obviously Al-Tanf base, like you're saying, would be a prime target because that's where, jihadis, Western-backed jihadis, one of the areas where Western-backed jihadis are you know, formed, kind of like what do you call them, Saruman's Uruk-hai in Lord of the Rings. They grow them out of the ground there, out of the mud.
Yeah. Well, you know how it began? It began because 100,000 refugees gathered there trying to get into Jordan when ISIS came out of the desert in 2014. And so it began as a protective justification. It was to protect them. But since then, it's been turned into a terror factory.
And you notice in that map, who is this person anyway? I don't know who posted that. Josh Rogan. Who is Josh Rogan? Washington Post columnist. He's notice he's stuck on the map. Regime-held Syria.
Right.
Imagine putting like a mark, a text on a map like that. You know, you might as well put like regime-held America.
But this is how the American military justify what they're doing there. They say, if you go, there's a Wikipedia page on it, they say what their purpose there is. It used to be to help the refugees, but that's dwindled now. They've either returned to where they were from in Syria or they've gone elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's like a few thousand of them. Now the updated Wikipedia page says the US military is training not the Free Syrian Army. That was the old iteration in 2013. Now it's the Syria Free Army. They just switched the words around.
Mm-hmm.
And they're called the Syria Free Commando something units. And like, so as he would see it, this is where we're producing freedom. And the regime held is the illegitimate, you know.
Yeah.
They can't seriously make that claim, but so they don't use it. But that's what they tell each other on the ground there as to why we're here, why we fight, you know.
Yeah, because they're...
I don't know if this is related. I've got a side note thing. The Jordanians, in quotes, because who knows, Jordan is full of US air bases, have been conducting airstrikes inside Syria as well over the last month.
Jordanians.
Yeah, on at least 3 occasions. Ostensibly, one is also last week, ostensibly to, quote, combat drug smuggling.
Mm-hmm.
One of them actually reported by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. You remember that group that was all about listing Assad's crimes. In fairness, that group does cover a lot of incidents that happened there. The observatory condemned what it called a massacre, which killed women and children in a village which is in Suwaida. It's not in the same area. It's further down. It's closer. It's more like directly due south of Damascus. And that was last week. And they noted that it was the 3rd time so far this year that Jordanian warplanes have violated Syrian territory. What's weird about that is the Jordanians themselves say, that wasn't us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because technically it's not, because basically Jordan's military, it's an American military. You know, they get all of the weapons from the US. Except, you know, Jordan is, to a large extent, a US protectorate in the Middle East. Like you know, they try to do with so many different countries in the Middle East, you know. And all for Israel, obviously. So, yeah.
So Friday night, the retaliation finally comes. The Pentagon says it's 85 sites in this part of Syria, eastern Syria and northern Iraq. And it was all choreographed such that Biden's at the ceremony in which the coffins of the 3 soldiers come back to the US, after which the bombers take off, fly all the way over there, do the thing. So is that the case, that the strikes were carried out by US bombers, not by ships in the area or from bases?
Certainly from bases in the area.
Probably. It's probably combined.
I mean, they weren't flying bombs. Maybe they did just for fun, 1 or 2. Maybe they tried to fly. I mean, I think I saw reports saying they used bombers that flew from the US, which is kind of ridiculous. You know what I mean? The idea that they would fly, you know, 7,000 miles or something from the US just to bomb Syria when they've got military bases all around the area. You know.
Well, the AP write-up of it is dozens of strikes launched by long-range bombers from the US targeted Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, IRGC, and affiliated militia groups. I love how they're just an add-on. Just hours after Biden received the remains of the 3 service members. The strikes began at midnight Friday. 85 targets, 125 precision munitions. 125 over 85 doesn't sound like much, you know.
Yeah, because it's just all for show. Here's the you're talking about those. I mean, this is back. I can't find anything either. I saw it somewhere, but obviously we know it's the case that Washington, that the US conducts has done that in the past, where they've contacted Iran and said, "Listen, we're gonna attack you, and so when you respond, only attack in a proportional way. Don't do too much. Don't be going crazy. And then Iran says, okay, we'll do that, and you just let us know when to go. You say start, and then we'll all go, right? So this is from 2020, which you mentioned there. And if you just scroll down,
Paywall. Washington Post.
You can't scroll at all.
You can,
No.
but then
Can you
Well, I can hack the website, but
try and hack the website? If you why don't you refresh and stop it before it loads fully? I usually do that, and then it instant hack. There you go.
oh, there we go.
Oh my God,
guys,
Sally's a
don't be
hacker.
revealing methods and sources.
So if you scroll down, yeah, it says it's just basically it's talking about Trump's time in office, and when he fired, whenever he greenlighted the assassination of Soleimani, and then okay, so the 2020 attacks on the Al Assad airbase. Can you see that there? No, further down a little bit. Yeah, the 2020 attacks on the Al Assad airbase and on that facility in Ibril had raised fears in the United States would respond with actions that could ignite an enduring conflict. After the killing of Soleimani, Trump warned that any Iranian response would be met with a forceful one by the United States. He wrote on Twitter that it would be hit very fast and very hard. But even as Trump spewed fiery threats, his administration was attempting to stave off reprisals from Iran that could have spawned things out of control. The Wall Street Journal reported that the United States sent messages in the days after the assassination to Iran via the Swiss embassy in Tehran, urging it not to escalate things further. It appears that the back-channel messaging worked. Iran appears to be standing down, which is good for all parties concerned, and a very good thing for the world, Trump said in his address. That's obviously back channel talking, basically saying, listen, probably in advance, maybe even you could presume that they told him in advance, listen, Iran, we're going to kill Soleimani. You can respond, appropriately, but don't go too far. This isn't, like, basically what I'm saying is when we kill Soleimani, that doesn't mean we're starting a war with you. So in order to save face, you guys obviously are going to need to respond. You're going to need to use a lot of rhetoric in the press and stuff, and for your people, and say this is an extreme violation of our territorial integrity, and it's
although it took place in Iraq, but
okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's an assassination.
It's an assassination of blah blah. So anyway, you're going to get very, and they did get worked up about it and said all sorts of things. But then, and this is just an article from Swiss Info, basically that showing that Switzerland is the nexus point for these kind of situations. And this is from around the same time as tensions rise between the United States and Iran. Switzerland's role as intermediary between the two countries has turned to the spotlight. On Sunday, the Swiss envoy representing US interests in Tehran was summoned by Iranian authorities in protest over threats made by US Donald Trump. Trump said the US would target Iranian sites if Tehran attacked American citizens or assets in retaliation for the killing of military commander Qasem Soleimani. Iran had threatened the revenge after the US confirmed on Friday that Trump had ordered the strike blow. So as part of actually the Swiss Foreign Ministry confirmed a meeting that had been held under the protective power mandate. And that's a term they use, and Switzerland has exercised this power mandate for the US and Iran since 1980. And it actually it does it for six different protective power mandates, i.e. channels between different groups. Maybe they're all between America, anyway, and someone else. But anyway, that's what Switzerland does. So all of that is to say simply that, yes, of course, this was probably the same channels were used in the same way this time as well, which was look after those Iraqis, the Iraqi PMUs, Popular Mobilization Units or Popular Mobilization Forces, after they attacked Al Tanf base and killed 3 of our soldiers, and we went public with it, we are going to respond in a few days, and just understand that that's what it's for. It's we're responding because we've decided to use this this event, this opportunity, in order to garner public support for the Biden White House in a presidential election year. This would be the full conversation that the Americans would have had with the Iranians. Would have been, look, the Iraqi militants that to support to one extent or another have attacked our bases 165 times in the past 4 months. We have not until now admitted to any casualties, any deaths, although there definitely very likely were. But we can easily cover those up. But we're using this event to go public. We're going to go public with the death of these 3 soldiers on this occasion.
Yeah.
We're going to go the full press coverage, like you were just saying, interviews with the parents.
The coffins, having the ceremony with Biden.
Exactly.
For these deaths.
Yeah, for these particular ones, we're choosing to go with these ones, just because, why not? We got to pick one of them, and it seemed appropriate. And in fact, it's, there were 3, lower level military personnel that were killed, so we don't have to expose who it's not a problem exposing who they were. And if these were 3 CIA officers, or if they were like the Navy SEALs, whatever, we don't do that. Or if they were more high level intel operatives within the military intelligence who are involved in running jihadis out of a town base, we obviously can't go public with any of that. But these 3 guys we can do. So that's why you end up having headlines like this in the BBC: Biden attempts transfer of US soldiers killed in Jordan.
Even
and of course,
they were killed in Syria.
Yes. So the response was not really the point. The point was what you see right there, which is for Biden to have that grumpy grandpa look in his face, and to have that video footage and stuff, so that he can look presidential, and he can kind of galvanize the country around these, the sadness, the terrible, deaths of these 3 military 3 soldiers. And that's good for the Biden White House and good for his image in a presidential year. So that's why we've done that. Now, the fact that we're doing that means that we're going to have to respond, because we can't dump that on the population and then not actually respond, because our population tends to be a bit kind of like jingoistic and kind of like rabble-rousy and that kind of stuff. They want some blood, like, whenever we put that, when we jerk their emotional chains in that way, we have to give them some relief. So we have to respond. Yeah. So listen, Iran, this is what it's all about. This would be the longer conversation, but Iran understands it all. And so that's why we're going to then target these bases. So just so you understand all that, don't be going crazy and like starting something, because we're not looking for an escalation. We just like shooting missiles at things. It's drumming up business for the military industrial complex every time we fire a missile. So we got to do that now and again, because we can't keep that stuff in stock all the time. We got to use it. But we're not interested in a wider conflict.
We'll tell the American people we've hit Iran, in quotes, even though you didn't.
It's simple.
For an attack against us in Jordan, even though it wasn't. It was in Syria.
Yeah.
And what we'll obscure is who exactly was hit. Yes, indeed, there are links to Iran, but only in the sense that Soleimani, ironically, was the one who was instrumental in helping these militias form in 2014. But overwhelmingly, they were an organic response from within Iraq and Syria to Islamic State. People have forgotten, I think. Islamic State covered half of Syria or more, and about a third of Iraq. They were almost at Baghdad in 2014. And it created a huge counter-response. To this day, there's something like the Wikipedia page on the Popular Mobilization Forces estimates 250,000 fighters. And they keep calling them militias. That's because they've agreed to keep them not official military. But since 1920, maybe 2020, the PMUs are now officially deputized to the Iraqi military.
Yeah. They're part of the Iraqi military, because
But the West doesn't want to talk about this, doesn't want to describe them accurately. They much prefer to call it's just Iran they're interfering in other countries, and that's why we need to be there to help police the region, because Iran is just going crazy. You know?
Yeah. I mean, this from the Voice of America. Iran-backed militia official downplays U.S. strikes in Iraq. This is from just yesterday. Iranian-backed militia, and then if you scroll down to what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but 10th paragraph. Iraqi spokesman Al-Awadi condemned the strikes as a violation of Iraqi sovereignty, particularly since some of them targeted facilities of the Popular Mobilization Forces. The PMF, a coalition of, again, Iran-backed militias, was officially brought under the umbrella of the Iraqi armed forces after it joined the fight against the Islamic State in 2014. But in practice, it continues to operate largely outside of state control. Well, how do you know it?
No, it's not.
At this point, and then the second paragraph, the Popular Mobilization Forces said in a statement Saturday that one of the sites targeted was an official security headquarters of the group, in addition to 16 killed. It said 36 were wounded, while the search is still ongoing for bodies of others. And then if you go to, that's the Popular Mobilization Forces, which is an Iraqi group under the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, although according to some it operates on its own, whatever. But all you have to do is, I don't recommend going, Wikipedia has its usefulness, but this is the Popular Mobilization Forces page on Wikipedia, and you see there in the first paragraph, first paragraph. Popular Mobilization Units as a group was formed in 2014 and have fought in nearly every major battle against ISIS. So you have a situation where the US is targeting the main group that fought on the ground face-to-face against ISIS in Iraq during the ISIS years, and now the US is... And maybe it has always attacked that group, because, as we know, ISIS was, to a large extent, a creation of the West and Israel with their partners in Saudi Arabia and a couple of other countries, which were whose purpose was the group of ISIS, that jihadi group, was just a bunch of jihadi mercenaries for hire put together by the West, Israel, and Saudi Arabia to primarily overthrow the Assad government. So, of course, America didn't do much in the way of attacking ISIS. It was their own creation, and it had the goal of ISIS was to do America's work in the Middle East, i.e. primarily overthrow Assad. And during that whole time that the US was funding and arming and training groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the Middle East to try and to make a mess of the Middle East and primarily, like I said, overthrow Assad, you had the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces, certainly backed by Iran, who were trying to stop ISIS while America was encouraging them. But on that, just if you go back to that, it says also many of its main allies, in particular the Shias, but again, the Popular Mobilization Units in Iraq are not just Shias, they're Sunni as well as other groups. So it's not, and obviously Iran is Shia, but they're not only Shia, there's Sunni groups, Sunni members within them as well. Trace their origins to the special groups, again, Wikipedia can't help itself, Iranian-sponsored Shiite groups which previously fought an insurgency against the United States and coalition forces.
In the Iraq War. This is, there's a thread running through all of this that the United States narrative making is trying to dance around. Mm-hmm. That they're essentially still fighting the same source in the Middle East as it have been since post 9/11 years. It's the people there don't want American bases in the fucking country anymore. Yep. And they said it. Look at the... And, in a sense, the United States... It's a war, so, all's fair in love and war. They have a right to do what they did as retaliatory strikes. But say what it is, because they did indeed kill your soldiers at that base in Syria. But say what it is that you're doing. It's covered in this wishy-washy bullshit. Here's the actual statement from... So the rationale that the PMU fighters were they in Iraq or Syria? Who knows? The whole area is an open borders on it. As to whether they're in Iraq or Syria is vague, you know. So the Iraqi resistance group, PMU, we just described, claims responsibility for the attack on the US base in Syria. This is interesting because this is the Turkish news agency right above it, and they talk about it being Jordan the whole way throughout. So if you scroll down, it's a short piece. Okay, so the PMU claimed responsibility Sunday for last week for the drone attack at the Al Tanf US base in Syria. The people in the region are going to play this bullshit, pretend it was Jordan. They know it was Syria, so they're saying it's Syria. The group stated that it launched an attack. Now they give two specific names. They're from the same Al Tanf area, but it's Ash-Shabadi and Rukban bases in Syria. So there's probably more than one facility over there. It's not just Al Tanf. Al Tanf is like the general area. But anyway, as well as they're also claiming the naval facility in occupied Palestine. That's a reference to the Israeli naval facility at the Haifa base that was hit with a cruise missile about 10 days ago now. And they say this is in response to the massacres committed by the Zionist entity, Israel, against our people in Gaza. The group added that it will continue its attacks on the strongholds of the enemies. So that's what they won't ever link. They won't ever link things in the Middle East, going back to U.S. occupation of Iraq and the fact that people generally want the Americans gone. Certainly in some of the countries, maybe not Jordan, for example, but in Iraq and Syria for sure. And they will never link it to Israel and what's going on there right now in Gaza.
Yeah.
The American people, all they hear is the IRGC, which is used to be, back in the bad old days of the Gulf War, it was, you know, Saddam's Republican Guards. That's it. They just hate us. We got to get them because they hate us. And now it's just the IRGC. They're stationed all over the Middle East. And so we're just going to attack them because they hate us.
Yep.
It's phony. It's phony narrative. Give the real reason why you just bombed 85 sites in two countries that were not Iran.
Right.
And don't tell the American people we just bombed Iran. We got them back for our boys. It's bullshit.
Yeah. Well, it's actually, you know, it's bigger than that. Obviously, you can expand that out to, you know, what the US is in the Middle East for at all. You know, if you look at this again. Sorry to rely so much on Wikipedia, but if you go down to legality, and then the second paragraph is the US has called the Al Tanf base a counter to the Russia, Syria, Iran coalition's residual influence in the area.
Yeah, it's naked geopolitics.
So it's the Al Tanf base, which is an American base for, you know, arming training jihadis,
moderate rebels, as they call them,
jihadis to wage Al Qaeda type jihadis, ISIS type jihadis to wage war against, you know, governments that it doesn't like in the Middle East. And in this case, Al Tanf base is in Syria, on Syrian territory, and they call it, in part, the base on Syrian territory, a US base to counter Syria's residual influence in the area, in their own country.
Right.
On Syrian territory. So yeah, obviously it's a broader geopolitical game being played here, and people need to understand that all the time. Obviously, if you want to understand what's really going on, you have to keep the bigger picture in mind.
And just for documentary records, put this one up. There's one of dozens. There's loads of Middle Eastern media reports about this. About Al Tanf being an ISIS factory. So this is 2018. Headline in Press TV, U.S. forces training terrorists at 19 camps inside Syria. They may be, you know, of varying types of facilities, just a house or something, but probably including actual camps and fortified bases, you know. So a military expert at a diplomatic school run by the Russian Foreign Ministry says the Pentagon is training dozens of terrorists in war-ravaged Syria. Vladimir Kuzin with the Moscow State Institute of International Relations says the camps were receiving weapons, munitions, fuel, food, and other supplies from 22 military bases outside Syria, presumably in the region, though. and that Americans were training terrorists at the Al-Tanf military base in the south of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's just a Russian, but there have been dozens of Russians and others in the Middle East who've pointed this out. It is secret, though. It is hard to get. Like, you're not going to get the photos of them doing it. You can't. Maybe there's satellite imagery if someone could just, leak that to the public. But it's all it's black ops stuff. So, of course, people will counter, well, hang on, it's just a Russian source, going to believe the Russians. Well, true, but like the subject matter here is black ops.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're going to do whatever it takes to protect that from being,
Yeah, and the Russians obviously
generally known.
The Russians are well aware of it. Again, this is history, but you have to go back to 2016. This report, U.S. jets showdown with Russian warplanes over Syria after bombing of Pentagon-backed rebels. Blah, blah, blah. U.S. military officials held a video conference with Russia in which they expressed concern about the attack on the coalition-supported counter-ISIL, quote-unquote, forces at the Al-Tanf garrison.
Right.
So basically, the Russians dropped a bunch of cluster bombs on Al-Tanf, or the Al-Tanf base, on a part of it back in 2016 because they knew that's where a bunch of jihadis were coming out of.
And no doubt there were
course,
casualties, American.
And it's called Pentagon-backed rebels.
Pentagon-backed rebels, Iran-backed militias.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Russian-backed terrorists.
It's like proxy war up the wall.
It's
there's no such thing as
proxy.
actual war anymore. And this is like, we've been saying all along, within the past few years, people have been, wetting their pants a little bit about...
Except Ukraine. Ukraine is, honest to God, front lines.
Well, there's plenty
trenches and everything.
Well, but it's proxy war. It's by definition a proxy war. You know what I mean? It's the proxy war par excellence, but all of this is proxy war. Proxy wars are the only show in town and have been for quite a long time, for the past 15 or 20 years. It's all been about proxy wars, i.e. the West, geopolitics, America in particular and its allies, its Western allies, but primarily America, trying to maintain its hegemony in the world by pushing back peer competitors like Russia and China and prevent them from spreading their influence. And they do it by arming and training groups in other countries to fight against Russia and China and any other of the nation states that might be aligned with Russia. Then they get fought against, again, via proxy forces.
Yeah, and in general, each side understands that where there are, quote, advisors, you don't hit them. But it has happened. I suspect there was all kinds of things going on in Syria in 2015, 16, 17. The Russians cluster bombed Al-Tanf. Mm-hmm. Then there was this thing where something like 400 Wagner, again, Proxy, PMC, were killed in American strikes. Some were also in eastern Syria. So the lines are crossed, but it's off the record. Plausible deniability on both sides.
Because it's proxy.
Both sides get to save face and back down.
And that's a result of the reality and effectiveness of MAD, mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
When America, as a global hegemon, nuclear powered nuclear nation, wants to go to war effectively against a peer competitor like Russia or China, its main competitors in the world that are attempting to unseat it, it's going to it can't go to war with those two countries because they're all have nukes. And if you go head to head with our military against your military, or try some kind of invasion or whatever, direct contact, with open contact, then you very quickly raise the prospect of nuclear exchange. So you can't do that. So basically, they can't go to war with Russia ever. They can't go to war with China ever. Directly, Americans can't. You can't have American troops fighting against. So all the talk about American troops fighting against Russia, whatever. Yeah, there may be American troops fighting against Russian troops, or against Russia, but not directly. So the only choice in that situation is to have some kind of a proxy war.
Yeah, you brought up the 2020 case of the US mediating through Switzerland with Iran to show the extent to which that was contrived or at least kept within parameters. as evidence for what probably just happened as well with these airstrikes on Friday. There's even more direct evidence. The AP reports that the US, before doing so, got on the deconfliction phone lines with Russia. Because you'd wonder, there's Russian AD all over Syria, right? So can Americans just go in there? No, they have to call first. When that happens, they're going to tell the Syrians, who are going to tell the militias. Now, they say Reuters is reporting 40 people were killed in the 85 sites hit with 125 missiles. Is that a lot? I don't think so. I'd say most of them got out. They probably don't give the Russians precise locations, but they give them some idea of the general area. So 40 killed is probably limited, thanks to having to call the Russians first, who tell the Syrians, their allies, who tell the militias. So that was what took place last week. That's the current example of that deconfliction 4 years ago with Iran. And it underscore how, like, this is happening all the time. Yesterday, the same PMU, Iraqi anti-ISIS Axis of Resistance fighters, issued another statement claiming they had attacked yesterday the other main US base in Syria at Al-Hasaka up in the northeast near the border with Turkey. This is reported in Xinhua, Chinese agency, but an Iraqi Shiite militia, that's the PMU, claimed responsibility for another drone attack on a US military base in northeastern Syria. They claimed they launched an explosive-laden drone to attack a US base without giving details about casualties. Do they even get to know themselves? It's crickets in the media. Crickets. There's no big Pentagon presser. There's no wave of condemnation in the headlines in the New York Post and the New York Times, the Washington Post. It's just another one.
Yep.
Which underscores that they picked one last week to run with. We gotta show these people in the Middle East that we're still in the game, kind of thing, you know. Let's pick one of them. Okay, go. Whereas every day, a U.S. base is getting hit somewhere. The figures are wildly vary, but isn't it like something like 160?
Yes, I said 160, but and like I said,
been hit in 3 months.
Yeah, but that's what I said, and it's not. I don't think them picking this one to publicize it had anything to do with showing anybody anything, or showing them that we're still in the game or anything like that. I mean, they've been launching missiles and responding on several occasions already. There were 165 attacks since October 7th against of one form or another against US bases in Iraq and Syria. I think the main reason that they decided to go public with this was because to give Biden a presidential moment in front of the cameras in a presidential election year.
Right.
That's the only reason. I mean, nobody's under any doubt that America is involved in the Middle East. I mean, they're talking the media, the Western media is, replete with reports on them attacking the Houthis and there's no problem about making it clear that they're fully engaged in protecting the Middle East or protecting their interests in the Middle East, etc. The question as to why they would bring up, when there very unlikely have been other deaths amongst 165 attacks against US bases in Iraq and Syria over the past 4 months, why they have, when they have ignored all of those or silenced all of those or downplayed all of those and not mentioned them, why they would suddenly announce these three. They didn't need to do it to justify attacks. And that's not even mentioning Israel, which has been just happily and nonchalantly attacking Iran's, quote-unquote, Iran-backed militias or Iranian interests in Syria for repeatedly over the past 3 or 4 months, and long before that, Israel has been doing it forever. And when Israel does that, they're doing it very much in line with American interests. When you hear that Israel has attacked Syria, that may as well be America has attacked Syria. So They have no problem in doing that or in launching strikes whenever they feel like it. They don't need to announce the death of 3 soldiers to justify it. So I think the only reason they announced the death of 3 soldiers was, like I said, to give Biden a presidential moment.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Israel and Iran. You remember 2 weeks ago, Israeli airstrikes, presumed because they never admitted, but whatever, hit a house, diplomatic house of some type in Damascus and killed 5 IRGC. In this case, they really were, because Iran themselves put out the photos and the names of these people. They were IRGC, Iranian actual advisors in Damascus. Well, guess what happened right after the American airstrikes against the IRGC? That's what they told the people. But they were hitting the PMU, anti-ISIS PMU. And then they were telling Iran behind the scenes, we're not actually going to hit your people. We're going to hit the militias that we know you're linked with, but are not actually you. Proxy warfare, right? Israel goes, hold my beer. Early hours of Friday morning, they did it again. Israeli jets took off from Golan Heights, targeted a building in Damascus and killed an actual IRGC guy, this fellow. And Iranian media published his photo, name, yep, he was IRGC. Just scroll down for the text. In the early hours of Friday morning. Again, they're like, Israel watches the contrived show and they go, no. We're not going to pretend to hit Iran here. We're going to hit them somehow. Yeah. Which is exactly what happened 4 years ago as well, we think. Remember your theory that Israel threw in a spanner in the works in that negotiated settlement via Switzerland when that plane was shot down, the civilian airliner.
Over Israel, yeah. That was right after Soleimani.
Over Tehran, yeah. So, yeah, Iran was hit by Israel under cover of America pretending to hit Iran, but not. And pretending to do so in Jordan, but in Syria. It's like so phony. It's phony war. It's kind of gay, but like you said, there is a serious reason for it. It's to avoid,
escalation, and everybody's talking about, everybody's as each event occurs, they're like the Western media have you believe that this is about to spill over into
Armageddon. The Telegraph headline last week is Armageddon here.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's probably more on this, but it's all connected with other issues. Lloyd Austin's back. He's finally appeared after a month. See, it was just cancer, Joe. You with your wild conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Let's have a look. This is him appearing on stage Thursday for his first Pentagon press conference in at least a month. Remember, the story is he's been missing because he had prostate surgery in early December or mid-December, just before Christmas. But then he forgot to tell anyone, and Biden didn't know about it. So here he is last week. Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's my pleasure to welcome Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin III to the Pentagon briefing room. The Secretary will deliver opening remarks and then take his questions.
Anyway, after giving, he basically did a mea culpa. I'm sorry, I've been a bad boy. I should have told people. That's just...
Yeah, and the main point there is, does chemo for prostate cancer usually cause you limp?
No.
As we mentioned before, UTI, does urinary tract infection usually end up with a 2-week stay in intensive care?
Nope.
But apparently...
And why the need to hide it?
Well, just because he's
From the White House.
he's a private kind of guy and doesn't like to bother anybody with his problems, you know. Even though he's the Secretary of Defence and like by law he's required to
supposed
tell
to,
everybody
yeah.
on the same day, and he has a history of doing that immediately. Whenever he, for example, like we mentioned in a previous show, he had COVID on the very same day that he tested positive. He announced on the Department of Defence website that he had tested positive and he would be working from home. He was very on the ball about his legal duty to inform people of his. Inform the country, inform the government of his unavailability for whatever reason. But this time, it was 22nd of December. He already obviously had screenings before that. 22nd and then eventually goes in on the 22nd of December for prostate surgery. Is in hospital for like a week or something over Christmas, and all this time. Not a word about the screenings that obviously would have been there to lead up to him having surgery. Not a word about the surgery. Then he's back out just after Christmas, and then he gets complications around the turn of the year, around the end of the year, and apparently the complications were a UTI, and then he's in intensive care from the first of around the start of January for about 10 days, and it was only on the 3rd or 4th of January when he was in intensive care for his UTI that he decided to actually tell anybody, or came out that he wasn't showing up for work. Very strange. But you know, whatever the media says, right?
Yeah, it's kind of freaky how few people question it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like. But then we have, you know, government officials pretending all the time, saying one thing, doing another. Like in this case, like in the scenario we're positing, he would have gone to Ukraine and not declared it.
Yeah, of course.
Which happens apparently because just 2 weeks prior, in late November, he'd been in Ukraine, photo shoot, met Zelensky, there they are. Okay,
Only when you go to the presidential.
So apparently
residence.
They also do other things where they're not on the record. It's off the record
All the time.
All the time. So,
especially when they're going to places that were for staging and decision-making centres, as the Russians call them, covert decision-making centres, where you have NATO and US personnel interacting with the Ukrainian personnel and telling them what's up and how they have to keep fighting against the Russians to the last Ukrainian, etc., etc. So obviously it seems that Austin was there. Yeah, Austin was there. They backdated the whole prostate thing, so he was there around the turn of the year, basically, and he got kintaled, and
but survived, huh?
yeah, not survived, but had a bit of shrapnel damage there. Obviously something to do with the legs, something lower extremities, lower body.
He said complications arising from the surgery were extreme pain in the leg, abdomen and hip. So there's the whole lower half, yeah. Initially, when the first photos of him were when he gave a statement or joined a conference, like in his hospital robe 2 weeks ago. And they only showed him from here up. They weren't going to show anything else.
So extreme pain. That's a common symptom of a urinary tract infection. Is extreme pain in the legs. What did he say? The legs and the hip,
And the abdomen.
legs, abdomen, and hip. Yeah, extreme pain. Generally speaking, UTI causes you pain in your PP if you're a man, and that's about it. Especially when you're passing, when you're peeing, that's when you have a pain. Doesn't usually radiate out up to your abdomen. Certainly not into your legs or your hips. That's something else was going on there. Because that's the official story, was that he had a urinary tract infection. And that's what ended him up in intensive care.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. People don't care about horse shit. They just are happy to swallow piles of horse manure and say, thanks, can I have some more? I don't know. What about, but the thing about it is, if you notice that, where's Russian Chief of Staff, Gerasimov. Haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a similar theory in the West about him as there is about Lloyd Austin? Missing in
Well,
action.
The Ukrainians were obviously on it immediately, saying that we took him out and that kind of stuff, and that there was reports previously that they tried to, that the Ukrainians had tried to kill him. You know, way back in, I think it was way back last year in October 24th. In Business Insider, Ukraine nearly assassinated Gerasimov, leader of Russia, according to a military report. And then this is a more recent one. Putin's top generals have gone missing. So Ukraine's security service tried to kill Gerasimov, chief of general staff, according to the Washington Post. So there's been reported by Business Insider, and it's according to the Washington Post. And this is when he visited the front lines in sometime in October. So we don't know if that's true or not. But if it is true, then trying to take out Lloyd Austin would be an appropriate response, you know?
Right. So it's, they're careful to avoid MAD, but everything short of that.
Mm-hmm.
You can target each other's generals and cabinet ministers. Is Putin fair game if he's flying somewhere and activate a satellite? Or is that too much?
I'd say they'd love to, you know, but I don't know why they don't try. Maybe he's just too careful.
Well, he says himself that there have been 5 attempts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else on the Middle East? Well, obviously Israel.
Israel's just being psycho.
It's just the same, isn't it? Well, there have been differences. What's this talk about a ceasefire? There were talks in Paris.
Yeah. Doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Yesterday or early today, they bombed Rafah, which is a refugee camp very south of Gaza. So they're continuing to slaughter Palestinians with abandon, and to the point that Palestinians literally have nowhere else to go now. They're in the south of Gaza, and the Israelis are focusing on that now. So don't know what else to say about the Israelis. I think I've said all there is to say, really.
The ceasefire supposedly is 3 months, and it's the exchange of prisoners and hostages.
Yeah, I heard about that.
It's all
but
worked out, but
no movement on it yet. We'll have to wait and see. But
apparently they have ground forces in the north. Gaza City itself, they have moved out.
Mm. Yeah,
there's drone footage
in.
from there, which is just like,
Mm-hmm.
wow. You can actually see across the whole strip now to the sea, with the buildings are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I suppose it's maybe not as intense as it was a couple of months ago, but it's still crazy. Rafah is the last place, like you said, and they did announce it. They're not just negotiating in Paris with someone, Qatari official, I think, with a 3-month plan about how they would completely end it or stop it. At the same time, the Israeli government announced that they were going to enter Rafah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last post. That's where most people are packed right now in the very south. This morning they hit a kindergarten.
Yeah, kindergarten camp.
Okay, so while this is going on, this is there's enough mainstream Western reports on this that obviously Western media is mostly carrying water for Israel, but not always. It's so flagrant and egregious what they're doing, and shocking that even MSM is like, what the hell? So this is a report from British Channel 4 News about a big powwow conference that was held in Israel last week. Have a listen.
You wouldn't think there was a war on that young Israeli reservists are being killed, not to mention Palestinians. Mind you, those at last night's Conference for the Victory of Israel in Jerusalem care little for Palestinian life. They think Palestinians should be deported from Gaza to make way for Israeli settlers. At least 10 Israeli government ministers attended the meeting, arguing to resettle Gaza, even though such views are at odds with official government policy.
It is time to return home. It is time to return to the land of Israel. It's time to encourage emigration. It's time to impose the death penalty on terrorists. It's time to win.
The families on stage have signed up to resettle Gush Katif, Gaza settlements that were dismantled by the Israeli government in 2005. They want to turn back history, to use this moment of crisis to expel Palestinians from Gaza in 2024, as they were expelled from what became Israel in 1948 and from the West Bank in 1967.
There will be no Arabs in the Gaza Strip. They will go to Turkey, to Scotland, to Britain. I don't want to kill them. I want them out of Gaza. And we'll use different methods. One of them is not to give them any humanitarian aid, so the countries of the world will have pity on them and take them.
At Kerem Shalom, a
Honest,
crossing point from Israel
I
into
suppose.
Gaza, activists, some of them relatives of Israeli hostages, have been trying to turn theory into practice by blocking aid trucks. They're not actually managing to stop the aid, but they say flour and sugar doesn't just feed hungry children, but provides the raw materials for explosives. They see no distinction between Palestinian civilians and Hamas. Inside Gaza, people continue to flee south from fighting between the Israel Defense Force and Hamas in Khan Yunis. They go by whatever means they can find. These are the people the Israeli right wing wants to push not just to Gaza's southern tip, but out to Egypt and beyond. They're dependent on aid from UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The Israelis say they have evidence that 12 UNRWA staff were involved in the Hamas attack on October the 7th. Although UNRWA has sacked the accused, some countries, including the UK, have paused funding pending an investigation.
We're forced into tents. Our children need to be vaccinated and pregnant women to give birth. Where will they go? Education has stopped. What will these children do? Where will we take them? UNRWA is our future and our life. Who else will support us?
Israel's far right has no pity for Palestinian civilians. They may not succeed in resettling Gaza, but the attacks of October the 7th have only served to bolster them. They see this as a moment of opportunity.
Israel's far right. That's the only sense in which she was carrying water, because there are polls in Israel today, still like last week, showing that upwards of 60% or even 2/3 of Israelis think the IDF didn't do enough in Gaza. Didn't kill enough, didn't kill them fast enough. So is it just the far right? Far right in the Western mind, oh, that's the fringe minority, you know.
No, it's the mainstream.
Well, it's the whole country. It's the substantial portion of the country.
Yeah. Worst. I mean, a really kind of scary proposition is if this can, there's no reason to think this won't continue on, and Israel won't continue on doing what it's doing and squeezing the Palestinians in Gaza, and making life more and more intolerable for them. And if this year, as some in the World Health Organization are anticipating there's some kind of a new pandemic coming, then things could get really, really bad for. We could cover, let's say, under which Israel could really enact a final solution for the Palestinians in Gaza. You know what I mean? And that's not even considering the possible supply chain and issues and all that kind of stuff as there were with the COVID business. You know what I mean? We have shortages of food and people not being allowed in case you spread the disease. You know, basically countries locking down and shutting down their borders, and very little getting in or out. You know, well, maybe not very little, but Israel could use that as an opportunity to, under cover of something like that, to really do what we all know they're trying to do right now. You know.
Yeah. In Ukraine, we didn't mention it last week. I think we did. Everyone knows the Yuki shot down that Russian plane outside Belgorod.
Mm-hmm. With a Patriot.
With a Patriot. That's what the Russians said, or was that admitted?
The French
all
admitted
the way
it.
around. An American Patriot missile.
The Americans didn't admit it, but the French admitted it basically.
Okay.
Via it was in Associated Press, I think, an article. Associated Press quoting some French minister or something saying that recognised that it was a Patriot missile, which is because originally the Russians had actually wondered if it was a French air defence missile. So the French were like, no, that was
they found a serial number.
That was American. So they made a more or less official statement on it, you know, which is kind of like throwing America under the bus in a certain sense, because like initially it was even like some Western, I think CNN or something, suggests that it might have even been a kind of a friendly fire incident, that was actually Russia that shot it down, you know. So, well, that's not really possible anymore when the French government has more or less said, yeah, it was a Patriot missile, because I'm pretty sure the Russians don't have any Patriot missiles. So, yeah, and then the follow-on from that seems to be that at least it's coincidental that Zaluzhny, we're talking about Zaluzhny, the chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, is on the way out, or is behind the scenes, is already booted.
Yeah.
Is that because of a fallout from so whoever made the decision or didn't do due diligence and avoid shooting down a plane full of Ukrainian prisoners of war coming back to Ukraine? Pretty bad, like, you know what I mean? I mean, in any other country that would be a massive scandal, like.
Yeah.
I mean, there's your heroes, right?
Yeah.
Who had fought valiantly for the freedom of Ukraine and were captured by the Russians.
At the Azov style.
Yeah, and were captured by the Russians, and now they're coming home, and then you shoot it.
There's only two countries I can think of that treat their own like that. Ukraine is one, and Israel with the hostages is another. It seemed to me that Zelensky actually fired Zaluzhny last week and then brought him back.
Because the Americans said, what are you doing? Well, you think you're the president of Ukraine or something?
Maybe, but what Zaluzhny boasted about was having the backing of all the other top echelon of military in Ukraine.
Yeah, but there's the
he
people.
says, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And then he posted photos of himself on Facebook and his Instagram accounts meeting with some other far-right OUN, old school Banderite, with Bandera in the background, Nazi insignia everywhere, you know, going like this, like, come and get me.
Yeah.
I have these guys behind me. You can't get rid of me.
I don't know how that whole thing's holding up. Like, it can only be it's only being propped up by American money, you know.
And then on Ukrainian Telegram, allegedly this is a leaked transcript of Zaluzhny ragging on Zelensky. It's either transcript from phone or text conversation, I'm not sure. It's an example of some of the things. Excerpt from telephone conversations between them, or by Zaluzhny about Zelensky. F him, I won't talk to him. He's effing high again. He's a retard. The whole country's laughing. Nickname for Zelensky used by Zaluzhny.
Homo joker fucking comedian, short-assed.
Krivorog, imbecile.
Brad Stewart Little.
Look at the one down the bottom. Small Mossad agent. That must be an issue. Like, so many of them are genuine, like, anti-Semitic, like, you know, bona fide neo-Nazis, and they've got a Jewish leader. There may be more behind that, of course. What was that a reference to, you know? Zelensky has boasted in the past that his dream, his vision for Ukraine is to become a new greater Israel. Scroll down, if we just take a look at this document. How legit is this? Oh, hard to tell from here. It kind of depends on where it was leaked on Telegram. Who was the source? But yeah, I can imagine. It's probably in the ballpark because I mean, their spat is so public as well. I don't know. In ordinary circumstances, this would be like a W for Russia because you would see this and go, okay, the regime is about to teeter. There'll either be a coup or something like that. It's about to go. A reverse Maidan. But Ukraine will just keep going because they just got 50 billion from the European Union, ostensibly to pay salaries because the country's a corpse. Someone in, I think, the Hungarian government that tried to block this with a veto said the economy's a corpse. Well, what's the point in giving 50 billion? Well, it's to keep it propped up.
Collapse economically.
It's been paused, but the US is trying to convince Congress to give another 50 billion as well. So as long as you can keep the injections going, it doesn't matter how bad it looks in Kiev and vis-a-vis the military and on the front lines because they'll just keep
it's
it alive.
A zombie state until they withdraw it and then it just collapses overnight almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And Orban, well, he didn't sell out. I think he had no other choice. He explained that, where we took it as far as we could go. If we were to really uphold our veto, we were told we would have just been ignored, and Hungary would not have gotten
the funds from the EU themselves. They would have given that to Ukraine as well.
Probably. But what Orban managed to get out of it was a specific guarantees that the contribution Ukraine makes to that Hungary makes to that 50 billion for Ukraine goes to civilian purposes. Whether it does or not, who the hell knows? Exactly. In Ukraine, something like 18 billion has been pilfered and invested in Western assets like mansions in Switzerland. Who knows? But at least Orban's trying to get that on the record because, as he explained, actually, maybe we should listen to the whole thing because it's just a minute of an interview he gave when he came back to Budapest to explain why he'd backed down on this. He explains that, look, in the long run, Russia's going to win anyway. So I want Russia, he's kind of like saying between the lines, I want Russia to see that we tried not to be part of this. Have a listen.
Én elmentem a falig. Tehát azt tudom mondani, hogy ha ez a megállapodás nem jön létre, és Magyarország használja a vétójogát továbbra is, akkor az a helyzet állt volna elő, hogy megegyeznek 26-os körben, elküldik a pénzt Ukrajnának, azt nem tudom megakadályozni, és még a magyaroknak járó pénzt is elveszik, és azt is el fogják küldeni. Miért lett volna ez jó? És végül is találtunk egy megoldást, egy megállapodást, egy jó megállapodást, mi nem küldünk fegyvert, megkapjuk a pénzünket Brüsszelből, és egyébként Ukrajna fenntartásához, civil fenntartásához hozzá fogunk járulni. Továbbra is azt gondolják a nyugatiak, hogy a idő az a mi oldalunkon van. Tehát minél tovább tart a háború, annál inkább javulni fog Ukrajna katonai helyzete. Én meg azt gondolom, hogy ennek az ellenkezője igaz. Azt gondolom, hogy az idő az oroszok oldalán van, és minél tovább tart a háború, annál több ember hal meg, és az erőviszonyok sem fognak Ukrajna javára változni. Akkor miért folytatjuk a háborút?
Yeah. So his explanation at the end there was basically the rational approach to all this thing. Look, in the long run, time is not on the west side, so why keep it going, I wonder what they tell themselves in NATO and Brussels and Washington. Like, I doubt, as he suggested there, that they believe that if they just keep giving Ukraine money, eventually there'll be a break and the tide will turn. I don't think they really believe that. But it must be like the X factor of having special information, special knowledge about other upcoming things that will eclipse all this so that Russia's its win, won't matter in the end, Having said that, I think we should be fair. Like, well, fair. I'm not sure. You tell me what you think. The Yukis sank another Russian ship last week. Okay, it's just a corvette, but I mean, there's 50 dead sailors. I don't know how much did they survive. Russia's quiet about it. The Ivanovets. This was done with sea surface drones. They've been in play since the beginning. I remember seeing the first one in 2022, and for the most part, the Russians have successfully fended off attacks. But this, I don't know how many swarmed this ship, and they got it. That's not just a symbolic win, I think, for Ukraine. It shows that drone production, and an edge, not just a technology edge, but an actual military edge. It's still there in Ukraine's. Even though it's a corpse, there's still some serious potential to sustain a war, keep it going. Hence the billions.
As long as you can produce the weapons, and in terms of sea drones, you know what I mean? I mean, they're not doing very well in producing enough weapons for the actual regular Ukrainian army, but in terms of sinking the old ship, that's just a propaganda effort. The Russians, there's no reference to it at all that I found in any Russian media that it actually happened. There's just there's video evidence. There was first of all video evidence on Telegram, and then you saw it was reported quite widely in the Western media. And there was, the video evidence seemed to look legitimate, but the Russians just said absolutely nothing about it, as if it didn't happen. Although I saw a report on people who were confirming it from their sources on Telegram, said that all of the sailors were evacuated. There weren't that many, so they were all evacuated. But yeah, that particular ship, there's a few of them in the Russian Navy, and they'd been used in, they fire cruise missiles and stuff like that, so it's not nothing, but it's a relatively small ship. But it's strange that the Russians just said absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah.
And then during the week, also talking about shooting at ships, there was the USS Gravely in the Red Sea had to use its close-in weapon system, which is basically I think it's called a phalanx. It's a rotary cannon, an automated kind of R2D2 looking thing that's targets, and it's got radar or whatever targets, but just fires fairly big caliber bullets, a large quantity in a short period of time at any incoming missile. It's the last line of defense, basically. Something like maybe 3 kilometers away, it'll start to target. If something gets through, and then at 2 kilometers, it'll start shooting at it, and then CNN reported it as being within a mile, that the Houthi missile got within a mile of the ship before it was shot down by this rotary cannon. So, but it was kind of interesting because there's video of it, and
the Houthis claim they hit it.
Well, they didn't say that specifically. They said that it had successfully targeted the US. I don't know if they named it as Gravely, but a US Navy ship, and that they had successfully hit then an American commercial ship that was heading to Israel, and that was confirmed by everybody because there was a fire on a ship that was on a US registered commercial ship, But before
those
on the
photos
same day,
published,
on the same day the Houthis published the video. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a pretty close call. Yeah, I mean, when you have to use your last defense, your last line of defense, which is just bullets, basically, albeit fired very quickly, and many of them. But this is the video of that event at the beginning. So that's, I don't know if that's the missile or not, but anyway.
No, it's probably okay.
That's the explosion. See, it does seem to be
an explosion close up.
Yeah, you can go back to the beginning again, and you can look at it again.
It's
the first time you see it is below the ticker, actually. The first part of the explosion, you see below the ticker after this one, right there. It does seem like it's, not
then it
not
sails
the actual
away,
ship.
but with smoke.
Well, I mean, that's the question: is whether or not the smoke is from, like, it has smokestack, right? It's got a gas engine, which generally don't produce a lot of smoke anyway. It's I think it has. They also have a diesel engine that they can use with the gas powered turbine. It's basically like a jet engine, but the smokestack is up high. You know what I mean?
Scotty's got a freeze frame of the moment there.
Yeah.
So
it does look to be in front of it, you know, but
yeah,
how close it is, like within a mile can be, 500 yards. But if you look at this picture of it, that's from the video as well, but yeah, you see that, but if you look at this picture of it sailing away, if you click on the picture getting bigger, see that smokestack, see that black part, more or less?
In the centre.
Yeah. That's like generally where the smokestack is, and there's smoke coming from there. But look at the smoke coming, like at the back of these ships is a helipad, a big flat area of a helipad. Looks to me like there's smoke coming from the very back of it, and there's no smoke, there's no exhaust down there, basically, right?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it wasn't close enough that it could have actually damaged the ship in some way, not serious damage, but that it could have the shrapnel from the explosion shooting down the missile from within a mile, whatever that means. However close that actually means, could have actually caused some damage to at least start a little fire on the back of the ship. And we call that one a win.
Well,
call that one a hit.
CNN probably reported it accurately. Then they said it was a very close call.
Yeah.
So they're nervous. They're nervous enough to try to get China, remember, to ask Iran, who they just attacked in quotes, to ask the Houthis to please stop. So the Houthis could yet sink something. They could yet sink a ship, an American military ship.
They could.
But
it could happen.
Even then, it's not going to be Armageddon, because
that's the kind of escalation that that the Americans want to avoid.
Right.
Because that's it's like we're just talking earlier on about why they publicise the deaths of those three soldiers in Syria is because I think they wanted to use it as propaganda for Joe Biden to make him look presidential, etc. So that carries a lot of weight, That kind of stuff carries a lot of weight, propaganda and the appearance of America's prowess. And I mean, they're happy to use, like on 9/11, for example, that was, this horrible wound inflicted on us, and they got as much as they possibly could out of that. So they're not averse to, showing that they've been hit, that they've been wounded, that they've been that they got their ass kind of sort of handed to them a little bit. So they wouldn't be averse to that as long as it can be. But generally speaking, they won't just do it and say, "Oh, look, we got punched in the face." They'll only do that when it's for some other purpose that it's worth that. So because the American people are very sensitive, very sensitive about the military and about their own reputation, and they're sensitive people in general, and they don't like to hear that they've been brought up their whole life thinking that we're the greatest nation on earth, we're the greatest military on earth, and so it affects them quite badly when they hear any of their soldiers or they're encouraged to believe that any of their soldiers or any part of their military has in any way been damaged or hurt or whatever. So when you expose the American people that, you have to make sure that you're going to provide a remedy for that pain, which is, now we're going to smack the people. We're going to go after the bad guys. You know what I mean? We're going to go after people who did 9/11 to us. We're going to go after bin Laden. We're going to spend 10 years hunting for bin Laden. We're going to get him, and finally, when we get him, there'll be thousands of people outside the White House just in ecstasy, basically.
USA, USA,
chanting USA, USA. So I think propaganda is very important for them. So they want, for them, escalation would be. One of the worst case scenarios that the American government, DoD, White House, whatever, could envision, and the military as well could envision, is where one of a major US military asset is legitimately taken out, and they weren't prepared for it, and they have to just suck it up.
Nightmare.
Yeah, because sink a US aircraft carrier. And then what do? And you claim it's the Houthis, Iran-backed whoever did it. What are you going to do then? You're going to go through Switzerland and say to the Iranians, look, That was pretty horrible, right?
So we need a city. Give us you pick the city. We'll just level it. Done.
But no, but at the same time, they're going to have to say we don't want to escalate this.
Hmm.
So we're going to have to negotiate with Iran something that is commensurate with the sinking of a US ship, but without it being okay for Iran. That Iran will be able to accept it. It's pathetic.
It's pathetic. It's so pathetic. It's so Western liberal.
Mm-hmm. It's slimy.
The Texas border showdown.
Mm.
I had to look for this information. Wasn't that hard in the end. Reuters did carry it. So there was a trucker convoy. There is. Excuse me, it is. It's currently still heading for Eagle Pass, but it looks like it's just a few hundreds. So it hasn't galvanized Americans anywhere near but then it's a different time. The Freedom Convoy in Canada was because Justin Trudeau wanted everyone vaccinated or else.
Mm-hmm.
Take our border back. Vehicle convoy to rally near Mexico, U.S.-Mexico border. I think they say up to 300 trucks, but they could be downplaying it as well.
Yeah, I think that hasn't really gone anywhere because it seems. I think the Biden administration has basically backed down.
Right.
They have removed. They're not challenging the Texas National Guard. Basically, they've decided not to put in the federal border agents, whatever. Or they've decided to remove the federal border agents and at least tell them not to interfere with what the Texas National Guard is doing. And Texas now is actually putting up its own border fence, supposedly.
Right.
So there's not really any need for these guys really anymore, at least so far, unless it were to re-escalate in some way. But it seems to have been de-escalated, basically. You know what I mean? Maybe Biden thinks that, but the problem is that it's still a problem.
Yeah.
Texas now still has a problem in the sense that there's a whole infrastructure set up to facilitate the entry of illegal immigrants into Texas and into the US, and it's been going on for many years. Maybe the Biden administration thinks they've got enough at this point, or maybe they're content that Texas won't be able to fully stem the flow, and they'll be able to work covertly in facilitating that flow in other ways. You know what I mean? Maybe they, instead of going publicly or head to head with the Texas National Guard and the governor, they'll do it in more covert ways. Where how hard is it for to get some guys to go down and knock down a chunk of the border fence, or cut open a chunk of the border fence to facilitate it? Do you know what I mean? You can, if you're willing to put those resources into it, you can try and. I mean, it probably is difficult as long as Texas is patrolling the border, but it's a very long border. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's just
difficult to patrol. Yeah.
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 It's jaw dropping how this is. The scale of it is just unfathomable. I mean, this is no longer this isn't. People are having a conversation about it that they imagine. It's the old left-right stance on it. Oh, let them in. Oh, that's too many. This is something different. We're talking about just under Biden's 4 years, something like 11 million people. That, as Musk has pointed out recently, there are more migrants in the United States, specifically like illegals. They come across the southern border, than there are people being born.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. population is growing at the same rate it was before, but the growth is over 50% of that growth is not from births, it's from arrivals. I don't know of any other situation ever. There's never been a wave of migrants like that. Even the U.S. is famous. Like the thing they keep referring to is Ellis Island. Bring all your needy and stuff like that. The U.S. it's a nation of migrants and stuff. The rates of migrant entries at the peaks, which back in the day, in the 1890s, produced a similar kind of social crisis where people were like, no, this is too many. And they started to close it down periodically, was like a fraction of the percentage even relative to the total population that there is today.
Mm-hmm.
There's no comparison. There is no. People are imagining, oh, this is the same old thing. This has been a left-right issue going back centuries. No, this is something totally different. Now, the conspiracy theorists on the far right, when their terms, replacement, migration, and stuff like that, they start to have meaning. You see, they weren't nuts after all. It's the scale is just unfathomable. Like I saw, and the fact that there's either no discussion about it, or if you do see discussion about it in the media, it's along the lines I just mentioned. Oh, this is an old left-right thing. Of course, if you're a Democrat, you'll always or if you're a Republican, you're always against. It's not that simple. Like there's a guy who's in New York and he's publishing drone footage. And that's what he did this week. Initially, he broke into. He didn't have to break in. You can just walk into a migrant center, and it's somewhere within view of Ellis Island in Brooklyn or something. Some park. It was kids' soccer grounds or something, and he just walked in the gate, and he got chased out of it actually. But he uploaded his footage. Anyway, update is this week he published drone footage of it. And the scale of it's massive. It's like huge, massive tents and facilities and heating and cooking and showering and everything for thousands of people. And that's just one of them. And they're shrooming up all over the place.
Yeah, well, obviously that all relates to this year's presidential election and what they're planning. It may relate to it, I mean, it could be exploited, it could be used. There's obviously other reasons for mass immigration, but it could be used by the Democrats because all of these people have come in at least under a Democratic mandate, right? So if there were some way you could get them all to actually be registered voters, then not all of them, but a chunk of them, a few million, like I can swing an election, a few million votes, right?
Do you think that's what Musk is theorizing, that's what the real rationale for it is?
Could be. It certainly could be.
That was said about the Democrats. I mean, it was in the movie Gangs of New York. The Tammany Hall Democrats of the day, the migrants would literally come off the boat and they give them a voting card.
Yeah, it's been done before, obviously. Yeah, so it's not new in that sense, But certainly that's why it would stick out as a possible rationale, or one possible reason, one of the possible reasons for having so many immigrants come in to be able to swing an election. But I mean, this year's election, everybody's like super worried about it and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, maybe it'll go off smoothly. And I can't imagine Biden's going to get another term, because unless it's rigged or something. But if Trump, I mean, obviously, I reckon they could rig an election one way or another. With so many voting machines and stuff like that, they could, rig an election if they really wanted to. Although doing it without being exposed might be more difficult. But if they can't rig an election, I mean, maybe they'll just try and, who knows? When I say they, I mean like the Washington kind of deep state intel agency conglomerate type thing. But I think they're just planning to, in some way or other, mess with this election. Like I think a lot of people have that impression that they're planning to mess with this election some way and make it into a situation where there's that could give rise to some form of a mass civil disturbance or quote unquote civil war of some description, by having Trump win officially, but then calling it into question, taking it through the courts, and then denying him the presidency, and maybe Trump, going ahead and declaring himself president, and then this is what we've been warning you about. He always wanted to be a dictator. He's going to use the military or something to police his unofficial inauguration, and it won't be recognised. No way the Americans always don't recognise the results of elections in other countries. Well, a section of the Washington establishment this year could very well not recognise the result of this election in their own country, and particularly if it's Trump. Obviously, if it's Trump who wins, or officially wins, then it's like, no, it didn't happen. And he's not our president, and he can take up residence in the White House, but Congress, it's going to be split, I suppose, but a big part of Congress, or majority of Congress, will not recognise him as president. Then Congress will run the country and the White House will just go fish. Trump can do whatever he thinks he wants to do, but we're not, there'll be a separation, basically, a clear separation between, Congress won't play ball with the White House, basically, at all.
So you're still going
not approved funding,
you're
all
still
that kind
going
of
with the FUBAR this election.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Fubar.
yeah, of some description.
You have a vivid imagination.
Yeah,
That's all I can say. Well, or it could play out like this.
we just look at the way they're going.
This is how I imagine the CIA hopes it'll go. Real world example. So Imran Khan was the democratically elected Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Well, that's a joke, that whole thing.
He was ousted in a no confidence vote last year. Then he was put in prison eventually. There were lots of protests to keep him out of prison, but once they got him in prison, the protests have gone away. And by protests, I mean there were freaking riots. Last week, Khan was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Right before the elections, there's elections in Pakistan this week or next week for Prime Minister again. He was essentially imprisoned for leaking the very cable between Pakistan's ambassador in Washington to someone else who was technically working under Khan in the Pakistani government back in Islamabad. The contents of which concerned, quote, this is from Wikipedia, the US State Department encouraging the Pakistani government to remove Khan from office because of his neutrality on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's all laid out here in the Wikipedia page. There's a key paragraph here.
It doesn't get more Orwellian than that, you know.
Like this is
Well,
this is a real world example of what they do.
You're put in prison. You're sentenced and put in prison by the government because you released a document showing that the government was attempting to
undermine you. Traitors within the government.
That the US was pushing the government to stage a coup against you, and you wanted to release that to the public, which is a reasonable thing to do. And then you're getting put in prison for releasing that document for releasing classified information about them trying to get rid of you undemocratically. And then on top of that, once you're put in prison for that, another court case comes along that says you and your wife didn't wait long enough, according to Islamic law, didn't wait long enough to get married, the requisite 3 months. You got married after she had divorced her previous husband. You waited 2 months, and therefore you're getting 7 years in prison for that.
That's correct. So that was last week. He got 14 years. He just got 7 years. BBC right up here. Another Pakistani court sentenced Khan to an additional 7 years, so he's getting 21 years in total. And he's been in prison since the no confidence, since he was first arrested sometime last year already. So technically it's 22 years.
You know, this report actually says nothing about how ridiculously unjust this whole thing is. In this report.
It's just happy about it. They're just stating, just matter
pure
of
facts. Because that's just their impartiality.
Imran
right?
Khan, who's half British. I mean, he's famous in England. He was a celebrity in England, and they just write him off. Good luck. He's sent down the memory hole because he was popular and democratically elected,
right.
And because. Here's
BBC would normally be all over something like that if it was on the other side of the ideological fence. But
absolutely, but because he's Pakistan's Trump, in quotes, can you put up that Wikipedia page, Imran Khan? Yes. Do a word search for cipher. CYPHER.
CYP.
Okay. According to a leaked classified Pakistani cipher, that makes it sound all official, whatever, at a 7th March 2022 meeting between the US State Department, the US State Department encouraged the Pakistani government to remove Khan from office because of his neutrality on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Khan went to Moscow on February 23rd, 2022, the day before the SMO started. He didn't know about that, but whatever. It was a pre-planned meeting, but it was to discuss trade deals. And then part of that was that he was going to stay out of Pakistan, was not going to take a stance on.
Yep.
So you couldn't be neutral. You had to be fully on board with what Washington wanted.
He was arrested. He was ousted for wrongthink.
That was 7th March. The next day, Pakistan can be organized for the opposition parties to submit the motion of no confidence. He fought back 2 weeks later, March 27th, waving there's footage of it online. It was in the news in Pakistan, waving a copy of this document that showed that there was a traitor working in his government with the US State Department to remove him. And that is the fact that he waved that in public, that he has just been sentenced to 14 years for. Like, this is...
So you're
How
showing the people of Pakistan an example of treason at the behest of an
A deep
attempted coup
stater.
at the behest of the American government, and then the Pakistani. Well, I think I've said this before. Pakistan is entirely has been for 40 years or since its creation almost. It was a British protectorate basically. It was a British vassal state, and since then, afterwards, it was an American vassal state. It's entirely the military complex and the government structure in Pakistan has always been wholly, subservient to Western interests, and they're very concerned about it, making sure because India's too big, and they want to hold on to Pakistan at the very least because Pakistan, where it is, Chinese and with an eye on China as well, and the Chinese One Belt One Road initiative and all that kind of stuff. They're fighting against. They're fighting tooth and nail here across the board, and they're willing to stoop to any depths to maintain America's hegemony in the world. And it's just they're going to bring the whole thing down as a result of doing it. But maybe that's their plan as well.
All that lecturing Earth about democracy.
I know, yeah.
Pakistan does it by
Bullshit.
the book.
Yeah.
And Imran Khan he's perfect. He speaks English. He's worldly. Everyone knows him in the West. He should be totally friendly, reasonable. And then they do this to him. I suppose, we should be grateful maybe they didn't assassinate him.
They tried to.
They tried to, because they did assassinate Bhutto.
Mm-hmm. Peninsula Bhutto, yep. For the same reason.
It's for the same reason. When someone tries to actually do something for a country of 250 million people, no.
Not allowed to.
Washington puts a call in, and the next day, the network in that country of 250 million people is organized.
Yep.
And you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, but that's what I said. It's been entirely beholden to this. It's been a client state of America, entirely subverted to American interests for a very long time. Anyway, are we done?
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about Northern Ireland's first nationalist?
No.
No. Okay.
Not much to say there.
Okay.
Bit of a joke. Anyway.
That is today's joke, is it?
Well, no, I don't have a joke today. I have a statement, though.
Okay.
Joe Biden is more confused than Michelle Obama's gynecologist. So, I thought that was a fact check that, and it's true. He is more confused than Michelle Obama's gynecologist. So, we're going to leave it there for this week, folks. We will be back.
She could be the president.
She could be our president of the world. Very, very fitting, I think. I would love to see it happen. Anyway, so we'll be back next time with another show on whatever nonsense, as we keep saying, has been going on, and it's only going to get more nonsensy as time progresses, but we'll try and keep track of it all for you. So we hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed the show today, and thanks for watching, listening, and chatting. And don't forget to smash all the buttons that you feel inclined to smash. And we'll be back, like I said, next time with another show. So until then, we'll say bye-bye.
Okay. See you next week.
Bye.
Or soon. Bye, everyone.
Can't stop the signal now.